Engineer, author, sailor, activist, Pete Bethune is a restless man. In 2008, he just completed a record-breaking journey around the globe on a futuristic-looking trimaran called Earth Race, but when a journalist asked him what he wanted to do next, he wasn't sure.
Just off the cuff, I said, I might take it to Antarctica to disrupt the Japanese whaling. I got a call from Sea Shepherd and flew over to Friday Harbour and met with them over there. 6 months later, there I was driving the boat down to Antarctica.
Earth Race is refitted, painted black, renamed the Adi Gill, and armed with an intimidating Tikitane theme tune blasting out through 9,000-watt speakers. In late 2009, she joins the Sea Shepherd fleet in Antarctica's Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. Sea Shepherd leader Paul Watson had opposed Japanese whalers for a long time, but now had a new and fast weapon up his sleeve.
Up until then, they'd always struggled keeping up with the harpoon vessels. Adi Gill changed that. There was naughty stuff that was going on, like we would engage like prop fowlers and things like that to really disrupt their operations. But that was the goal, and certainly it made the Japanese lights pretty uncomfortable down there, having to avoid these smaller boats in front of them all the time.
We're pretty committed to what we're doing and lucky to have the chance to go down there and hopefully make a difference.
Sea Shepherd is a controversial group, but so are their opponents. Despite a 30-year moratorium on commercial whaling, Japan continued to kill more than 800 whales each year for what they call research purposes. The International Whaling Commission rejects this description, and so does Pete Bethune.
Technically, what we did down there was illegal. You're not allowed to go and deploy prop fowlers. You're not allowed to go and get in the way of a vessel that's engaged in fishing, for example. They have right of way over you. So we're breaking the law in terms of disrupting their operations, but we would also argue they're breaking the law with what they do. Sometimes your job as an activist is to create what I call a festering sore, and for that sometimes laws are broken.
January the 5th, 2010. Adi Gill and Sea Shepherd vessels Bob Barker and Steve Irwin are searching for the Japanese when a tip-off comes in. The fleet is only a few hundred miles away. The Adi Gill crew are ecstatic.
No one slept. I don't think you can try and sleep, but now we're all super excited because our goal, even though we'd come across the Shonan Maru up to this, our goal is to shut down the Nishin Maru.
The MV Nishin Maru is an 8,000-tonne factory ship used for processing. Harpooned whales are loaded onto the slipway in her stern. The Sea Shepherd tactic was to shut her down by blocking that slipway. If the whales can't be loaded, then they won't be hunted. Pete's job is to delay her, allowing the Bob Barker to catch up and get into position. 6 January 2010. After a full day of sparring, the Adi Gill crew deploys a length of heavy rope that fouls the giant ship's propeller. It's the break Pete was after.
The Nishin Maru stops, and then they start again, but just the sheer act of stopping such a big vessel, it cost them several nautical miles, and that allowed the Bob Barker to get much closer and get back within radar range. So in many ways, our job was kind of done for the day.
Pete and 4 other crew climb up onto the top of the Adi Gill, which is idling on just one engine and nearly still in the water. Several of the whaling fleet pass them by, but the last, the Shonan Maru No. 2, turns towards them. A security ship, her job is to keep protesters away from the Nishin Maru, and she's well equipped to do that.
We're getting hit by water cannons. We can't see because we've got water spraying in our faces. So there's an element of confusion going on as well.
Weighing more than 600 tonnes, the Shonan Maru dwarfs the 18-tonne Adi Gill. Pete remembers clearly the sensation of watching this much larger ship line them up.
Oh, terrifying. I thought we were going to be run completely over and we'd be bringing people back in body bags.
The Shonan Maru was overtaking the Adi Gill on the port side. By maritime law, the activists have the right of way. Suddenly, the Japanese make a late change to starboard. A collision is now unavoidable, and everything is about to change for Pete Bethune.
It came down on a wave on top of us, and the bow sort of pushed our bow right under the water. And as the bow broke off, this wave of water swept through the boat. We're all just clinging on for dear life as this wave swept over us.
A 3-metre section of the Adi Gill's bow was sliced clean off, but she was still afloat.
At this stage, the vessel was salvageable.
The Bob Barker came in for the rescue. The damaged trimaran was tied behind the bigger ship, and the plan was to tow her to a French station in Antarctica for repairs. But that's not what happened.
This is where it gets quite murky.
Sea Shepherd announces to the world that the crippled Artie Gill had sunk overnight and the Japanese were to blame. But that wasn't true. Pete Bethune now says he was ordered to secretly scuttle the boat by Sea Shepherd's boss, Paul Watson. The reason? It would make a better story in the media.
So Paul gives us the order. He wants the vessel scuttled, but he didn't want the crew to know. And it was made very plain to me, like, you better keep this till you go to your grave. So I went into the boat that evening with Chuck Swift, who was a captain of the Bob Barker, and Luke Van Horn, and we scuttled the vessel.
A month later, Pete Bethune is back in the Southern Ocean for a daring stunt. The plan is to board the Shonan Maru, arrest its captain and present a bill for the loss of the Artie Gill. Hopefully, Pete will be held and taken to Japan for trial, but he wasn't sure how he was going to get on board the boat in the first place.
Animal Planet, who were filming it, they were all over the story. At one stage, they looked to drop me onto the boat by parachute, which I sort of agreed to. But I mean, this is pretty high risk. So anyhow,
in Antarctic waters.
In Antarctic, what could possibly go wrong?
15 February 2010. It's 2 a.m. Pete and a crewman are racing towards the Shonan Maru on a jet ski. With them is a TV cameraman.
He's done like 5 or 6 seasons of Deadliest Catch, hardcore cameraman. He kept his camera rolling for about 30 seconds and then put it away. And that was Animal Planet doesn't pay me enough for this.
The first boarding attempt fails, but the second succeeds, and a triumphant Pete is on board the Shonan Maru.
It was one of the most satisfying feelings I've ever had in my life. As a team, we'd managed to pull it off. And in many ways, I was the lucky guy in the forefront of this quite daring mission.
Lucky is a relative term. Pete's detained and taken to Japan, where he's arrested and held in a maximum security prison.
Oh, maximum security prison's pretty difficult, really. Very angry place, a lot of angry men, a lot of broken men. And I came out a different person, and not all for the better.
The wife of anti-whaler activist Pete Bethune says supporters are threatening to leave the Sea Shepherd protest group over its decision to ban him from future missions to the Antarctic.
While Pete Bethune is trying to ride out his time in prison, a public relations storm is breaking all around the world.
Sea Shepherd has cut ties with the New Zealander because he broke a non-violence policy by taking a bow and arrow on board his boat, the Artie Gill.
I think that a lot of them are just not sure of the motives behind the statement from Sea Shepherd and the loyalty to Pete, who gave up everything to fight for the cause.
Paul Watson puts out a press statement saying that Pete Bethune he took a banned weapon to Antarctica. He's been expelled from Sea Shepherd, and that quite literally broke my heart. But then, with all the venom that was being put on Facebook about it, he sort of apologised and said, it was always a tactic. I knew that wasn't the case, but I was willing to forgive and forget. But in the end, it was probably the start of the end of my involvement with Sea Shepherd.
The anti-whaling activist Peter Bethune has pleaded guilty to 4 of the 5 charges against him on the first day of his trial in Tokyo.
He has pleaded guilty to trespass, to vandalism, to obstructing commercial activities, and to carrying a weapon, namely a knife. We also know that he has pleaded not guilty to the most serious charge of all, and that's the assault charge, which the allegation there is that he threw basically a rancid butter bomb onto one of the whaling ships and that a whaler was slightly injured.
Leading up to this, my lawyers are saying, you're going to get 2 to 5 years. You better prepare your family for this. So this is where it's starting to get dark for me. I thought I'd do a couple of weeks.
Pete decides he wants to take the stand.
And my lawyers initially resisted it for about a week. And eventually I said, what about if I give you what I want to say, you put it in Japanese and I will learn it phonetically. So what they did was they very cleverly rewrote it in a very Japanese kind of way, that this is why whaling is important to New Zealand and Australia. This is why they think it's wrong. I never meant to hurt anyone, and I apologise profusely in those things. And so I think it was about 12 minutes that I memorised. My lawyers afterwards, they said that was a turning point.
The anti-whaling activist Pete Bethune has been given a suspended 2-year prison term in Japan. Pete Bethune's wife Sharon is on the line now. Do you think it was worth it? Do you think he achieved anything in terms of his campaign?
Yeah, no, he definitely achieved what he set out to do.
It might have been worth it, but it still cost Pete Bethune and his family. He was traumatised by his time in prison, heartbroken by Sea Shepherd's desertion of him, and guilt-ridden over scuttling the Artie Gill. He was also broke.
I called up a friend of mine in Atlanta. He sent 10 grand over to me, and I went down to the bank on the Monday, and the 10 grand wasn't in the account. And I remember looking at this little wee bank teller, and I was looking how far away she was from me, whether I could grab her throat.
Pete Bethune made his peace with Sea Shepherd, but no longer works with them. In 2015, an American court ruled that Paul Watson had ordered the scuttling of the Artie Gill for the publicity it would generate. Sea Shepherd paid an undisclosed sum to the boat's owner. In 2014, the International Court of Justice ruled Japan's whaling program had no scientific merit. Japan disagreed and resumed whaling a year later, but with a much smaller harvest planned. Today, Pete Bethune is still involved in environmental projects, and in 2017 was stabbed in the chest while campaigning in Brazil against illegal animal smuggling. He says you win some, you lose some.
I think there will come a time where Japan will withdraw from whaling in Antarctica. It might be another 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. You've got to remember too, 2010, there was a significant drop in whale consumption in Japan. It was the first time the Japanese realised this is pissing off Kiwis and Aussies. No one in Japan had any idea that that was the case. It's the Wild West down there. There's no one going down there now. I would love to see the New Zealand government send a patrol boat and follow those whalers right round Antarctica. We have an obligation to send patrol boats down there. I think we should send one down there and use it to go monitoring the Japanese whaling and put that footage and those photos around the world.
What's a part of the story you've never been able to tell before that you'd really like to say?
I think the bit I spoke about, what really happened over the sinking, those were dark days. Like, I was part of what was a pretty dishonest act, really. Prison in Japan, it changed me, and not all for the better. When I look at things today, I'm comfortable with everything I did, except for the scuttling. That was the wrong thing to do. But the rest of it, I did the best I could. And it's not a total victory, but, we will try our best.
This story was produced for RNZ by me, Justin Gregory, using archival audio from Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision. It was engineered by Jeremy Veal. You can subscribe to every episode of Eyewitness at Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or on Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, or at radionz.co.nz/podcasts. Please make sure you give us a rating too. In the next episode of Eyewitness, early 90s Christchurch might have seemed an unlikely place for a groundbreaking Samoan arts organisation to form, but founder member Oscar Kitely recalls the idealism and the issues that drove Pacific Underground Theatre Company. And don't forget, if you have stories you want us to tell, you can get in touch with us at eyewitness@radionz.co.nz. Ka kite anō.